In 1989, author Amy Tan burst onto the American literary scene with her enormously popular and critically acclaimed novel, The Joy Luck Club. Undaunted by the extraordinary success of her debut novel, she exceeded expectations with her second book, The Kitchen God's Wife. Her third novel, The 100 Secret Senses, revisits the familiar themes, ghosts and dreams and loves and tragedies that run through her own life. While her earlier fiction focused on the relationship of Chinese mothers and their American daughters, her current novel centers around two half-sisters, and I'm very pleased to have Amy Tan back on this program. Welcome.
Good to be here again.
Oh, listen, tell me the title first, The 100 Secret Senses.
The 100 Secret Senses, as the character Quan talks about it, is those senses that we all have but are forgotten. It's hearing, seeing, feeling, everything, but it's also, I think, that total empathy that you would have with another person, so that there's no miscommunication on that what the other person is experiencing and feeling, you simultaneously feel and know. And it doesn't matter whether it's between living people or dead people, it's the same sense.
Okay, I want to come to you how this, where you came to this and all of that, but set up the story between Quan and Olivia and these two half-sisters and the relationship between them and what it is that you're exploring in that relationship.
Well, Olivia is American-born and she's half Chinese, and Quan, her half-sister, they share a father who dies when Olivia's young, and Quan was born in China, was raised there in a small village, and she comes to the United States when Olivia is 6 and lets Olivia know that she has yin eyes, the ability to see and talk to ghosts. She begins to tell Olivia these stories, and Olivia, scared out of her mind, tells her mother, and Quan is sent to a mental hospital. And because of this guilt, Olivia continues to listen to Quan's stories in Chinese about past lives.
Olivia's very practical.
Practical, skeptical, two sisters who have different beliefs about the world, and different rules about how you get out of situations. But I think Olivia's beliefs are tested when her marriage is falling apart, when things happen. I actually don't think of this book, The 100 Secret Senses, as being so much about ghosts as being about love and what we believe about love, and hence what, how our notions of that define what we hope, and how those hopes then determine what we choose to believe. So it's not really to say this is a book about whether or not you believe in ghosts or past lives or, you know, certain superstitions or religions. It has more to do with the power of love, unconditional love.
Power of anyone's unconditionally to give their love to another person.
Right. Olivia is always looking for love from her mother, from Simon, unconditional love.
Simon
loyal.
Is her husband, and the marriage is falling apart, and Quan thinks that she can save it.
Yes. Quan and her ghosts.
Right.
With their marital advice, they think.
But it's about the power of unconditional love and giving love without expecting anything in return.
What that means, which I think a lot of people today seem to be looking for. It was what motivated me to write about this story, because I would hear different people going through, whether it was problems in their family or marital problems, this notion of looking for a certain kind of love. And by writing this book, I was able to explore what I thought about love.
What kind of love are you looking for?
Well, I have lots of love. I have a lot of love in my life from my family. But see, that kind of love isn't always just complete joy all the time. There's a lot of hard time that comes with that as well. From my family, my husband, my friends. It's in part a loyalty that extends to everything you do. It doesn't mean taking abuse, you know, like when you talk about women who are in marriages and they say, well, I'm supposed to love somebody because they abuse me. It's a state in which you give and you don't expect something in return. So it's not necessarily taking, it's giving without expecting anything.
And what's your familiarity with yin?
Well, yin, as in yin eyes, the ability to see ghosts, is something that I've tried to sort of dismiss, much as Olivia does. I'm a skeptic. I try to be a rational person. I know that things like ghosts and past lives are fodder for ridicule. But a writer, as you know, often uses imagination and drops those boundaries to create something and discover something else. And during the writing of this book, I found myself moving closer to thinking that there was something out there in the yin, so-called yin world, the world beyond this one. Because there's so many coincidences that have happened in my life that I've called sheer luck. And I'd like to assign that luck to somebody and say thank you very much. Rather than believing that, you know, randomness is just somehow settled on me.
Yeah. But there is something about your life story that suggests you are, in fact, a product of will.
I'm
not
very...
luck, not good fortune, that you will to be who you are.
Yes, I think self-determination is part of that strength that perhaps I get from my yin friends, so to speak, to look a little bit beyond what I, you know. I'll tell you, one time when I was looking for my very first job, a friend of mine had died, was murdered, and I decided to quit my doctoral program and go find a job and work with disabled children because that's what he wanted to do. And I had no qualifications for this job, and the woman who interviewed me told me so. And before I got up to say thank you very much, I heard, as I had been hearing in the past, this voice, not a human voice, but just this complete understanding saying, just tell the woman why you want this job. And so then I started to do that. And
you told her about your friend?
No. I just said, I feel, you're right, I have no qualifications, but I need to learn a lot about human nature, and I'm so motivated I will work 5 times harder than anybody else. I will devote my life to this. And the woman said, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I think I'm going to give you this job. And things like that, where you could say, yes, that was within me, my own self-determination to do that. Yeah. But there was a little bit of a push.
Well, do you have some sense of mysticism about you, that you believe that, you know, that there
yeah, I have
moon
a mother.
And star. Well, how did your mother react to all this success you've had? Now, a third novel that's been well received.
My mother has a sense of humility about all of this, but she also believes that I have had help from my grandmother, who died in 1926. She thinks I'm so completely American that all the things that have to do about China have been transmitted to me through my grandmother telling me these stories. So my mother has always believed that I can see and talk to ghosts. You know, and it's not a case where I can conjure up spirits that I hear and see things. It's a matter of, just as, you know, somebody, if you ask somebody, do you believe in God? Have you ever seen God? Do you hear God talking to you? My mother thinks I see ghosts, and that's where I get my stories. So she's very proud of what's happened, too.
And your grandmother, tell me about your grandmother, because I'm remembering, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was a story, actually, that was related in the Joy Luck Club.
Right.
She was married in around 1914. Her husband died probably during the influenza epidemic of 1918. She was raped by a man.
And forced
later,
into a concubine.
Forced to become the 4th wife.
Right.
My mother always told me that my grandmother remarried, but she was the first wife. And while that was still shameful for a widow to marry, at least she was in the best position. And when I wrote the Joy Luck Club, I didn't understand how a woman would kill herself if she was in such a good position. So I changed the story, and I made her a fourth wife. And I put in all these other details. And when my mother read the story, she said, "How did you know your grandmother really was the fourth wife? How did you know that her death was not an accident, that she killed herself?" That was also the reason why my mother believed that my grandmother had told me the story. The rational side of me says, well, that is the interesting quality of fiction, that in delving for a certain kind of parallel reality, you oftentimes stumble upon things that are truer than what you're told in real life.
How has your perception of your Chinese blood evolved over the years?
Well, I think like a lot of Asian Americans or children of immigrants, I've gone through a gradual evolution of identity and what questions I should ask about identity. When I was 6 years old, I realized I was different, and I wondered if it was because I ate food that was different, and that's what made me Chinese. And whether or not my leg looked Chinese and different from another child's leg. When I was an adolescent, I was ashamed of all my differences.
And you thought about Americanizing your features.
Oh yeah, plastic surgery as soon as I could get it. When I was in college, I became very angry and felt I had to blame society for making me feel less than a true American. When I was in my 30s, I wanted to be closer to my family. In my 40s, I'm much more comfortable being both and having a wonderful time being both, and realizing that those questions of identity are very interesting questions, and that really everyone has them. The addition of another culture simply makes it an added dimension.
Are you writing for a particular audience? I mean, have you become somehow...
I write necessarily for myself. And if I were to think of an audience, I would become paralyzed with anxiety, wondering if I would be able to please that person and fulfill their expectations. I have always loved ghost stories since I was a child, and I wanted to write a ghost story that would be fun. And to me, this book has a lot more humor in it than my previous books.
Was it tougher to write? I mean, you've got two narratives here.
Well,
centuries apart.
I would say it was tougher because I had to throw away another book in order to get this one. And when I started this book, however, it went very quickly. I had found myself not knowing always where the story would go, but I had a wonderful time with it. The second book, I think, was the most difficult because the Joy Luck Club was such an unexpected success for me that I felt that I was going to be crushed by the weight of expectations for the second book.
For The Kitchen God's Wife.
Yeah.
And you weren't, and it was a success. And did that, you know, give you strength to proceed ahead with fearlessly towards the third novel?
No, you know, you wonder by the third that people are going to say, well, if she writes another mother-daughter story, she's a one-theme author.
She's repeating her.
Yeah, they're looking to see what your pattern is, and that by the third one, it's set. You know, I thought about writing a story so completely different, you know, that, and not caring whether it alienated my readers or anything else, you know. But I don't think it serves me, anybody, a purpose to write selfishly, just to prove something.
Yeah. Did you always want to write fiction?
No, I wanted to be an artist. But I think those are all related. Or I wanted to be a musician, the arts, the creative fields, where what you feel that you can't express openly to other people can be done privately and in a creative way. The idea of writing writing fiction really didn't occur to me until my 30s. And I decided simply to do it because I loved reading fiction. I was reading fiction by women that writers I loved.
People like Eudora Welty?
Eudora Welty, Flannery O'Connor, and then the new generation of writers who started in the 70s, who, the women writers, I think, really opened up the world of literature for the kind of diversity in literature that we have today. Women writers like Louise Erdrich and Toni Morrison, and just Jamaica Kincaid, so many voices, and I fell in love with their voices, and I wanted to find my own.
Will you continue to do children's books?
Oh, absolutely. For one thing, that satisfies my love for drawing, because someday I'm going to get good enough to draw my own picture book. Yeah.
All of this comes, this drive, this desire to, this talent comes, you think, from your mother and your grandmother?
I think it's passed on, whether it's through experience
or from
ghosts or whatever. There's a sense of survivalship that has come through in the women in our family. My grandmother suffered a great deal and died at an early age. My mother suffered terribly, and her story is the one that The Kitchen God's Wife is based on. And she's survived, but not without a lot of scars and regrets and sorrows and depression. I've been very lucky. And
how so? Because you built on you survived because you...
Well, I've had very painful things happen in my life, but I've also learned from what they went through, not to be beaten by the circumstances given to you. Well, as in the case of my grandmother, the society that she lived in and the circumstances imposed on her.
But it did beat her, didn't it?
Right, it beat her, but that I shouldn't be beaten by that sort of thing. Not to have regrets, or not to let regrets become barriers to what I can look forward to.
What do you look forward to?
Writing more books, trying to become a better writer, becoming the artist that I've always wanted to become.
Amy Tan, The 100 Secret Senses. The story of Quan and Olivia and the ghost, and how two very unlikely people are thrown together. And it was amazing, the language of Quan as she learned English.
Yeah, Olivia taught her English, which is why her English never was that good.
And she taught Olivia.
She taught Olivia, spoke to Olivia in Chinese, and Olivia as a child...
While she was asleep.
Yes, Olivia as a child just absorbed the language, infected her, yeah.
As I said, The 100 Secret Senses, Amy Tan. It's great to see you again. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And much success.
Thank you.
Work on your drawings.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.